And so what they said was, look, people in Florida, these people are liable to be armed. Those people will shoot you. Police can't. Think about that. Now, why? You know, because the next thing you know, if a police officer pulls his gun out and shoots, he has, what do you have to do when you get back to headquarters?
Oh, the paperwork is going to be just, I mean,
isn't that called a use of force? Right. Documentation, and you got to go through that whole process and so forth and so on. Yeah, criminals don't have to fill out all of that. It's an interesting.
Yeah, and you know what? That's okay, because you want the police officers who are representing the government to have accountability for every bullet that leaves the gun. It's very, very important. Nobody argues that at all. But I think your point is that in Florida, where they have gun laws that allow the citizens to be armed in their homes, the burglars are scared to go in the homes when people are there. In Massachusetts, it's like, well, you know what?
They're not going to have a gun.
They're not going to have a gun. So there's statistics to back that up. And it's interesting coming from a prosecutor too, because you know a lot of jurisdictions, the prosecutors, you know, they'll tell you, you know, you shouldn't have a gun. You know, it's
not me.
No, not you.
Now I'll tell you this: if they're going to continue to let all of these characters out of our prisons after we catch and release, as it were, if you're going to do that, don't you dare take people's ability to defend themselves away. You know, that they don't match, because then the criminals do win. It's a great article out of Atlanta, Officer Don, this week, where a young guy went in to rob this grocery store, and next thing you know, the clerk had a gun, and the clerk just shot him. And of course there's no charges because he was attempted to be armed robbed. And they go through any number of these processes where the people are using guns to defend themselves, and they call it there another Second Amendment save. You're not paying attention to me.
I'm paying attention to you.
Yeah, another Second Amendment save. So it's people are starting to fight back, and guess what? If we're going to continue to let people out of prison, don't take people's ability to defend themselves away.
What I was looking for is last night I was reading, did you read the store clerk, I don't know if it was Texas or wherever, that shot and killed 3 armed robbers. I think it was yesterday. Yeah, these dudes came into his jewelry store, tied up his wife, was tying him up, and he had a gun in his waistband. They didn't know it. And he drew the gun, shot and killed all 3 of them. So there's another interesting case.
Well, it's just people have had it, and they're starting to. Now they take great chances with this whole thing. But people, I'm telling you, all over the country, people are beginning to defend themselves against criminals, and you know what can you say? You know, those cases may very well be presented to the grand jury wherever they are, but there are laws now that allow people to stand and defend themselves.
Well, another classic example, and we'll move on, but in Florida this past week we had the school security officer who shot the gunman in the school board meeting. And it was interesting watching his interview. He said that they asked him, were you scared or whatever, and he said, you know, I had a lot of things running through my mind, but honestly one of the first things was the fact that I was probably going to get in trouble because I shot this guy in the back. Of course he shot him in the back while he was attempting to gun down the whole. But you know, that was in this former police officer's mind, is, you know, oh my God, I wish the guy would turn around because I'm going to have to explain shooting him in the back. Which he did, and everything was okay. You know, and it's a fine line. Nobody wants trigger-happy police officers or anybody for that matter. It's a fine line that you have to walk in the interest of public safety. But, you know, our hearts go out to the police officers on the street who make these decisions every day. And I can tell you right now, this decision to shoot or not shoot, they always err on the decision not to. Because every day, by the technical rules of engagement that you have as a police officer, you could shoot a lot more than we do. We choose the lesser force every opportunity that we can take it. That's the first thing you think about, and we're very proud of our police officers and our brave firefighters. You know, they respond to these calls and they deal with all kinds of things. You talked about the Brenda Cowan situation. You know, you just you never know what you're going to get into as a firefighter. You know, they're everything from the guys on the EC buggies to the guys running into burning buildings.
EC means emergency care. Those ambulances that the fire. You guys use all these acronyms.
Yeah.
The rest of us have to speak English.
And I'm not just saying it for that.
Yeah.
Well, wait. Okay, so next we're talking about the death penalty, which you discuss quite often. And you know, the question always comes up: someone gets a death sentence, and you've said this before. The number one cause of death on death row is old age.
That's right.
Now, why is that?
Well, it's interesting. We had an intern in our office that came to us from Georgetown College. Her name is Erin Fields, and they have to do a senior paper with an internship, and she did. She wanted to know what might be a good subject, and I said, well, why don't you look at the length of time people are on death row in Kentucky and try to explain that. Well, she did, only she didn't deal with it on how long they're on death row in Kentucky. She said, how long does a death penalty appeal last in Kentucky? And then she compared it to Virginia. And so here's what she found out. In Kentucky, the death penalty appeals average 14 years. That's the appeal. Then in Kentucky, our court system allows people to throw whatever they can up against the wall and hope it sticks. And then when they get a ruling on that, then guess what? They appeal that, you see? So what we have is appeals that just seem to last forever, and they do. But 14 years to go through the process. Then she looked at Virginia, and in Virginia, that same death penalty appeal process, because they're all the same around the country, it takes 5 or 6 years. Now there's an explanation for it.
I've got one too after you finish yours.
Well, she found that Kentucky has no time deadlines for anything. You know, for example, we had an 1142, which is somebody saying that a lousy lawyer, sit on a judge's desk for 5 years before he made a decision. You see? That's the kind of thing that lets it delay. Not in Virginia. Virginia has set time deadlines. And when they appeal it to one level, then guess what? Then the prosecution asks for an execution date. Bang, they get an execution date. Well, everybody better get with it, you see, because that execution date's coming up. And so then they make a motion for a stay, and then they appeal that decision. And once that is upheld, get another execution date. And so, I mean, it really moves along to the point that it takes a third as long to get the appeal process. Then they don't allow other people to raise anything without the court's permission. And in Kentucky, our court system ought to take charge of this appeal process and quit letting the defense and the defendants.
Here's an observation, being cynical here, but I think you follow the money. I mean, the reality of it is, who pays for all these appeals? Who pays for this process? And you're going to find the taxpayers do, and you're going to find that there are people who have job security and dragging these appeals out for 15 or 20 years. It's not all based on ideology. It's based on the reality of follow the money. There are people that get paid to drag these things out, and they're going to do everything they can. And you know, the legislature is there. A lot of the people involved in making our laws are defense attorneys. They're people who make their living in doing these kind of things, and that's just the reality of it. And when they talk about it costs too much to incarcerate people, so we got to let them out. No one ever discusses the fact maybe it costs too much to put off all these appeals, and we should come up with more of a streamlined process in the first place, and still give people